The biggest remaining needs for Texas football in the transfer portal? I'll tell you what they are. Next on Locked On Longhorns. Intro.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. You are locked on to the Texas Longhorns. I'm your host, BK Brad Kellner, Texas grad, Austin native, and longtime sports radio host here in the Lone Star State. Thank you for making Locked On Longhorns a part of your day every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment, and tell your Longhorn friends about Locked On, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. We'll get to the Texas basketball a little bit later in the show. Some great news for Sean Miller as he tries to rebuild the Longhorns roster for next season. But we're starting with some Texas football, now less than 2 weeks away from the reopening of the transfer portal. And the Longhorns, I think, need to be very active. We've got the top 4 positions of need for Texas. We're not going to do the top 5. We're going to go with the football number, right? 4 downs, 4 quarters. We'll keep it to the top 4 for today's episode, but the 4 biggest positions of need still remaining for Texas after the early window, and obviously as we get closer to the end of spring football. As of right now, the Longhorns transfer class ranks 59th in the country. They've got 5 commitments so far. All 5 of those guys are already on campus and practicing with the team right now. 3 defensive linemen, Travis Shaw from North Carolina, Cole Brevard from Purdue, and Hero Kanu from Ohio State. You've got Brad Spence, the linebacker, who transferred in from Arkansas, and then Jack Bowmeister, the punter, in from Utah. That's it right now. Just 5 commits. And again, a class that barely ranks inside the top 60. For reference, last year's transfer class was number 5 in America. So to this point, you're not moving the earth with the transfers that you've brought in. And I thought going into the spring, Texas had some areas that they needed to address. And now with some of the injuries that have happened here in the first 5 spring practices, I really feel like the Longhorns have some areas that they absolutely need to tackle. So we'll start with number 1. And these are in a particular order, by the way. The number 1 area of need for me is tight ends. And we talked about the Jordan Washington injury during yesterday's episode. Washington hurting his shoulder a couple of days ago in practice. It sounds like they're going to keep him out for the rest of the spring. Doesn't sound like an injury that's too serious, right? He should be good to go by the time Texas takes the field against Ohio State on August 30th. But still, a redshirt freshman, a guy who's barely seen the field in his time at Texas, a guy who hasn't caught a pass in his collegiate career. Those are valuable reps that he is going to miss. And then you look at the entirety of the Texas tight end room, you've got 0 career catches for anybody. Of course, you lose your top 3 guys from last year. Gunnar Helm off to the NFL, Juan Davis off to the NFL, and Amari Niblack. Man, you wonder if there's any regret with Amari Niblack right now. Like, we wouldn't be talking about Texas needing a tight end if Amari Niblack didn't transfer to Texas A&M. Now, I'm sure he got a bag from the Aggies, but I feel like Texas would have been willing to give Amari Niblack a little bit of extra coin to stick around Austin, considering what the rest of the tight end room looked like. I know he was a disappointment last year, didn't play a lot, didn't have a ton of production when he was on the field, but he would be, without a shadow of a doubt, the starting tight end for this Longhorn football team if he was still on campus, but obviously he's not. So it's Spencer Shannon, who's 6'7", 240. The idea of Spencer Shannon is exciting, but again, we haven't really seen him do anything in his first few years in Austin. Been on campus for a while, knows the offense. I'm sure has worked with Arch Manning in recent practice, obviously this year, but also the last couple of seasons as well. But again, no real game experience for Spencer Shannon, nothing for Jordan Washington. And then you go down the line. You've got Will Randall, who was Arch Manning's high school teammate at Isidore Newman, hasn't done anything in college. And from the sounds of things from the folks that I've talked to, it doesn't sound like we should expect much of anything from Will Randall this coming season. And then you've got Amari Winston, the early enrollee freshman. Like, that's it. Spencer Shannon, Will Randall, Amari Winston. Those are your only 3 healthy scholarship tight ends right now. Obviously, you'll get Jordan Washington back. And the good news, Texas has another signee in this number 1 class coming in. That's Nick Townsend. I'm really high on Nick Townsend. I think he's going to be a great player down the line, but he's not here for the spring right now. He gets to Texas in June, so he's going to be a little bit behind the 8 ball. And I don't know, expecting early enrollees to get significant PT in their first seasons feels like a lot. But you're talking about a guy who isn't here for the spring. I don't know if it's fair to expect big things or really anything from Nick Townsend in 2025. So you've got to get somebody in here who can make an impact. Now, it's going to be hard to get because there aren't a lot of big-time tight ends in the portal right now, and that's a position that isn't always easy to find because teams try to do whatever they can to keep their good tight ends around. Texas went after Max Clare, the Purdue transfer, in the early window. They lost out on Ohio State. I don't think Texas thought Max Clare was like big and strong enough to hang in the SEC, so I don't think they spent as much money or tried to spend as much money to go get him. Ohio State ultimately gives him what he was looking for, and the Longhorns will have to see him on August 30th. But that was it. Like, Max Clare was the only tight end Texas really went after, and they missed out. Now I think they have to do something. I don't know who's going to be available. This might be just taking a swing and hoping that something works. But this tight end room is not in a great spot right now, guys. Like, Jeff Banks has done a great job at Texas. You look at what Jatavion Sanders did. You look at what Gunnar Helm did last season. Like, the tight end position has been great, but let's not forget, both of those guys were Tom Herman commits / signees. This is the first year that Texas in the Steve Sarkisian era has tight ends that they actually brought to campus, and they don't. Again, down the road, they could have some studs, but right now, for the 2025 season, there's nobody that you could point to and say, I know that guy is going to produce. So Jeff Banks is an elite recruiter. Texas doesn't have Colin Simmons and a number of other guys on the I-20 corridor without him. But the tight end position, it's not where it should be at a place like Texas. And considering how important that position has been the last 3 seasons in the Steve Sarkisian offense, they can't just ignore that and hope somebody's going to step up. They have to go get somebody. Hopefully they can find somebody with some skins on the wall in college football. So that's number 1, transfer portal area of need for Texas. Number 2, very similar, wide receiver. And another injury that we've talked about earlier this week, Ryan Wingo going down. He's likely out for the remainder of the spring. DeAndre Moore is nursing a toe injury, so he's been out for all of spring, and he might not play at all the rest of the way. Those are your only 2 guys with any college production coming back. They'll both be fine by the summer and by the fall, but I don't think you can rely on just that. And I know the Longhorns have recruited the hell out of the wide receiver spot these last couple of years. They've got a bunch of 4- and 5-star guys who are going to be great players in Austin. But again, this is a win now type of team. I think, a starting 3 of DeAndre Moore, Ryan Wingo, and let's just say Parker Livingston, I think that is good enough to beat Kentucky. That's good enough to beat Mississippi State. That's good enough to maybe beat Florida. But that's not what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to beat Ohio State. We're trying to beat Georgia. We're trying to win an SEC championship game. I don't know if what you have right now is good enough to compete with the elite of the elite in this sport. So more receivers will be in the portal than tight ends. I think that will be an easier position to find. But again, it's a similar conversation. You at least have 2 guys who did some things for you last year. DeAndre Moore can play. I think Ryan Wingo is going to take a huge step this year. I think he's probably going to be wide receiver 1 for the Longhorns in terms of stats here in 2025. You at least have 2, but that's not enough. And both of those 2 guys are nursing injuries right now. Again, should be fine, but still, you don't want to take a chance to where you're 1 play away from only having 1 receiver with any experience. So I wouldn't be opposed to the Longhorns bringing in 2 receivers. I think at minimum they need 2 pass catchers. If you're combining wide receivers and tight ends into one category, you've got to get at least 2 pass catchers for your offense. But I'd be okay with 2 receivers and a tight end. You want to make life as easy as possible on Arch Manning. You're already breaking in a new quarterback. You don't need to be breaking in a bunch of new receivers and tight ends with the schedule that you have coming up. So Position number 1, tight end. Position number 2, wide receiver. We've got 2 more to go, though. What other positions do I think the Longhorns need to attack in the portal? Of course, if you're watching on YouTube, comment below with your thoughts on where you think the Horns should be looking. But we will finish out my list next on Locked On Longhorns. But first, a word for our friends at 5 Hour Energy. Man, daylight savings. I was talking to a buddy yesterday, and he's like, I still can't get my body used to the time change. It's been a few weeks, but I know some of y'all out there are still struggling with the daylight savings time change. That's where our friends at 5 Hour Energy come in. They've got your back. If you need that little extra boost to power through, whether you're staying up late watching sports, whether you're trying to squeeze in a round of golf after work, or hey, you're just keeping up with your busy work life and family life and everything else that this life presents, 5 Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. It's on-the-go convenience. I'm traveling this weekend. I always have my 5 Hour Energy with me wherever I go. Head over to their website, 5hourenergy.com. They've got more than 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack, have them delivered right to your door. But of course, if you need one now, grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They are everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized with our friends at 5 Hour Energy. All right, welcome back to Locked On Longhorns, your team every day. 2 down, 2 to go. Positions of need for Texas in the transfer portal. They brought in 5 so far. I think they need a few more. And we talked about tight end and wide receiver in segment 1. I know I mentioned that the Longhorns have already brought in 3 defensive linemen in this portal class with Cole Brevard, Travis Shaw, and Hero Kanu. But I think the Longhorns need more. That's position number 3 for me. Texas still needs to add another body or 2 on the defensive line because the Longhorns are losing 4 D linemen who played at least 250 snaps this past season. Now, Cole Brevard played 400 plus snaps at Purdue in each of the last 2 years. Travis Shaw played 363 snaps at North Carolina this past season. So you've got 2 guys that you think are going to be plug and play starters for you right there. But Hero Kanu, like that guy didn't play organized football for the first time until 2021. He was not a huge piece for Ohio State this past season. And then you look at the returning guys that you have. Alex January, I'm excited to see what he could do, but he played 94 snaps in his freshman season in 2024. Melvin Hills has yet to play a snap in his college career. Texas brought in some stud recruits, including the 5-star Justice Terry from the state of Georgia. They've got Josiah Sharma. They've got Myron Charles. I think all of those guys are going to be great players, and maybe the Longhorns can get 100 snaps out of those guys. But again, in the SEC, going up against some of the teams that you're going up against, I think you need more proven commodities. And any of y'all who have watched the Longhorns play the last 2 years, it's no coincidence that Texas has had its best 2 seasons in a decade and a half when it's had its best defensive line. Like, you need those guys up front. You have to win in the trenches, really at any level of college football or any level of football, but especially at this level of college football. Like, expecting to get a whole hell of a lot out of freshman interior defensive line in the SEC, that feels like a very, very tall ask. So, look, Sark and PK and Kenny Baker, they've already done a very good job getting 3 guys who I think will be a heavy part of the rotation there. But I would like Texas to improve their talent. I'd like them to improve their depth and just hone in on another defensive line transfer that has that power 4 experience like Brevard and Shaw has. Now, the defensive line market will be thin because most of the D linemen who entered the portal have already found homes. But there should be a couple more that Texas can go after that I think, again, could help replace some of what you're losing with guys like Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton and Bill Norton, just to name a few. Who am I forgetting? I'm forgetting somebody else in that interior defensive line who doesn't deserve to be forgotten. I'll remember it as we move on. And last but not least, man, this one's a little controversial. Like, I can hear some of y'all already typing kicker, 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 kicker. I don't know. Look, I'm worried about Bert Auburn. I don't know how much confidence I have in him right now after the way he ended last season. But you've got him on scholarship. You've got Will Stone on scholarship. I don't know if it makes sense for Texas to have 3 kickers on scholarship. That's just not a normal thing. So I think the Longhorns are going to hope that Bert Auburn or Will Stone is clearly better than the other guy and is good enough coming out of the spring to where Texas feels like they're okay. I'm going to bank on one of those guys figuring it out. But look, if the Texas kicking game sucks again in 2025, you will have every right to complain about the Longhorns not going out and getting a kicker. I'm not going with that one. Some people may say linebacker. Some people may say running back. I'm going to go offensive line. Because speaking of positions where Texas lost a lot, well, the Longhorns lost 4 starters from last year's offensive line. And all 4 of those guys, I think, are going to have good, long NFL careers. Kelvin Banks is about to be a first-round pick in a few weeks. I feel good about Texas's starting 5. We know what Cole Hudson is. We know what DJ Campbell is, your one returning starter from last year. Trevor Gooseby showed everybody a ton when he had to play late in season when guys got hurt. Those guys I feel good about. Neto at left guards sounding good in spring practice. Brandon Baker starting to get more reps with the first team, the former 5-star. I've got faith in those guys. I don't know if you need to go out and find you a starter on the offensive line in the portal, but just getting some depth. And that's a little bit against what the Longhorns have done in the Steve Sarkisian era, right? They've just trusted Kyle Flood to recruit and develop, and it's worked. It has worked. Texas had a Joe Moore Award finalist offensive line, and again, they're going to have 3, maybe 4 O-linemen drafted this year. That position has been awesome. Same conversation with the defensive line. No coincidence that Texas has had its 2 best seasons when it's had its best offensive line in a long, long time. I just want to make sure, Texas got very lucky injury-wise on the offensive line until the end of the year. Now, Kelvin Banks got hurt in the A&M game. Then Cam Williams got hurt in the Clemson game. So at the end, it kind of came to roost a little bit. But for the most part, Texas stayed very healthy on the offensive line. So the younger guys on this team didn't get a ton of playing time in real games, especially against good competition. They were in mop-up duty in some games, but against legit SEC level competition, they didn't get to play. So if you could find, I would just feel better about this offensive line if they could go out and get one experienced player just to come in and be sort of a 6th or a 7th man, like a swing tackle or a guy who could play guard or center, just somebody who has played in Power 4 college football. Again, don't break the bank for them. I think the other 3 positions are clearly more of need for Texas. But if you could add one experienced O-lineman into the mix, I'd feel better. Sort of that in case of emergency break glass situation. I'd love to see Texas go out and get one of those guys. I want to hear from y'all, though. Again, comment below. I've got tight end, wide receiver, D-line, O-line in that order as the 4 biggest areas of need for Texas when the portal opens up here in less than 2 weeks. All right, we'll shift gears here because the good news keeps on coming for Texas basketball. Another Longhorn has announced his intentions to return to the ATX. We'll tell you who and talk about what it means for Texas hoops next season, next, right here on Locked On Longhorns. But first, the NCAA tournament, it's still going on. The Final Four gets going this weekend, and our friends at FanDuel, hey, I'm a fan of FanDuel. Our friends at FanDuel are giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Again, $200. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, even who's cutting down the nets next Monday in San Antonio. If you want to go with the favorites, you think we're going to get a Duke-Florida game, you can do that. If you think U of H is going to pull off the upset against the Dukies, it doesn't matter. It's your choice. The FanDuel app is great, super easy to use, and of course, FanDuel.com has you covered. Get in on the college hoops action all tournament long with our friends at FanDuel.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Yes, it is your team every day. Welcome back to Locked On Longhorns. Good news for Texas basketball. Earlier today, Tramon Mark announced that he is coming back to Austin for another season. It'll be his 6th year of college basketball, his 2nd year at the University of Texas, and this feels like a huge win for Sean Miller. Of course, there's a lot of uncertainty with this Texas roster, a ton of seniors departing from last year's squad. Obviously, Trey Johnson is off to the NBA as well. A number of players who could have come back for another season. And at this point, only one Longhorn from Rodney Terry's squad has decided to enter the portal. Feels like by the day, we're getting news that another Texas player is coming back. And today, again, Tramon Mark is that guy. Averaged 11 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 2 assists per game. Dealt with a number of injuries this past year. Missed the first few games of the season. Came back, got banged up again, had to miss a couple of games in the SEC. But towards the end of the year, when he kind of became the point guard for Texas, a move that should have been made way earlier than it was, Tramon Mark really flourished. He had a great game against Kentucky, had a great game in that road victory against Mississippi State. I think he went for 24 in that one. In the SEC tournament, had 15 in that huge win over Texas A&M, had 16 against Xavier in that first 4 loss. So it feels like Tramon Mark, once he moved to that new role and once he finally got healthy, he showed why he's been a very good college basketball player for years. I mean, this guy played 20 minutes a game on Houston's Final Four team back in 2021. He averaged 16 a game in Arkansas last year in the 2023-2024 season. Like, he's a talented player who could score, who could also play some really, really good defense. And he's been in the tournament every single year he's been in college. So he's got some big game experience. And obviously we hope that stretch continues. So I don't want Tramon Mark to be the everyday point guard for Texas. I hope Sean Miller goes out and finds a true point guard in the portal. But Tramon Mark is a weapon. He's a guy who should start for the Longhorns. Again, he's had a lot of success at a number of different schools and really showcased what he could do towards the end of this season. Tramon Mark can be your number 2 point guard. And saying that, I don't mean he comes off the bench. He could be a starting 2. But if your starting point guard gets into foul trouble or if he just needs a breather, you feel good about running your offense through Tramon Mark with what he showed you in the last few weeks this year. So I still want Texas to go out and get a true point. I don't think this solves that issue, but Tramon Mark could score. Again, he's a very good defender as well. I like having him back. I'm curious to see how he fits in Sean Miller's offense. A little bit less ISO happy, a little bit more free flowing, and a lot more movement in that. But look, Sean Miller's a better offensive coach than Rodney Terry. So you'd like to think that Tramon Mark can increase his numbers with a better offensive coach this coming season. So Mark returns. We know he's back. We know Nick Cody is back. We know Malik Presley is back. Obviously, Dalen Swain, the Xavier transfer, is coming in. John Clark, the signee, the lone signee that Rodney Terry had, has announced that he is going to stick with Texas. Now we wait and see what happens with Kendall Weaver and Jordan Pope. Again, it feels like one day at a time, one of these Texas Longhorns is announcing their intentions to return, which means I wouldn't be surprised if we get announcements over the next couple of days that both Kendall Weaver and Jordan Pope are back. I think Kendall Weaver's like for sure coming back. I think Jordan Pope's probably 90% returning. Weaver's the top target for me. I think he's the top target for most Texas fans. I think he's the top target for Sean Miller, if we're being 100% honest. And I'll take Jordan Pope back as well. Didn't love his first season in the ATX, but if he could be like 90% of what he was at Oregon State, then he could be a valuable piece, probably coming off the bench for you and definitely not in a point guard role like he was, or at least they tried for him to be this year. But I would take Jordan Pope back as well. And things are starting to come more into focus for Sean Miller. There were just a couple of guys when he took this job that you knew were going to be back. Now it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 who are for sure back. And then you add Kendall Weaver and Jordan Pope into the mix. That's 7. I think that's a good starting point. Obviously, you need more. Go out and find you a point guard. Go out and find you a couple of big men in the portal to replace Caden Shedrick. But again, this thing is in a good spot. And this is a nice piece of news, the fact that Tramon Mark is returning to Austin. So we'll see. The portal is going wild in men's college basketball right now. You're starting to see some guys commit. You're still seeing more guys enter. It's kind of open season. Monday, April 7th is when we're supposed to get a ruling in that House versus NCAA case. So I think some teams are kind of waiting to see what happens there, to see how much money they have to spend on some players. Maybe we'll start to get more news about external transfers coming in once that gets cleared up a little bit. Maybe that's the holdup, but still more good news for Texas basketball. Tramon Mark, guy who's made the tournament every year, a guy who's a two-way player who can help you make some things happen. I like that he is returning, and you get him, you get Dalen Swain. That's 2 of your starting 5 right there. We'll keep you posted with what happens next right here on Locked On Longhorns. But that's going to do it for today's episode. Appreciate y'all making Locked On Longhorns a part of your day. For your next listen, check out the Locked On College Basketball Show with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. You just saw those guys a couple of minutes ago. March is here. April is here, which means the Final Four is here. So be the most informed college basketball fan throughout the rest of the madness. Find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. On tomorrow's show, we've got FanDuel's over-under win totals for the 2025 college football season, and we will preview Texas women's basketball's Final Four matchup against the South Carolina Gamecocks. Yeah, round 4 between Texas and the fake USC. We'll be talking about it right here on Locked On Longhorns on tomorrow's show. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and rate. Always appreciate y'all tuning in. Until next time, horns up, mic's off. We'll see y'all soon on Locked On Longhorns.